Hello and welcome to Aerospace Horizons. My name is Evan, and today I have a very special guest here with me to discuss not one, but two films related to the Blue Angels. One is just called The Blue Angels, and it's out in IMAX theaters right now, and will be on Amazon Prime Video on May 23rd. The other movie is The Round the World at the Speed of Sound, released in 1994. It was my entry point into the blues as a kid and inspired me heavily. I am honored to have the director of that 1994 film and executive producer of the new 2024 film on for an interview. Rob Stone, welcome. I'm glad to be here.
Hey, Evan. Thank you so much for having me, and glad to be here.
Do we get to say that? I don't know.
Of course, everyone can say it. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on. It's great to see you and talk to you. Like I said, Around the World was a huge inspiration for me.
So how old were you? Do you remember when you first saw? This is real. I actually probably shouldn't be asking this question because I'm going to feel really old in a second. How old were you when?
I don't remember when I watched it. I would have been in '94. I would have been 4 years old. So I think I must have watched it like 96 or 97, something like that. So I was talking with Boss Wooldridge. I didn't know if I had actually seen him fly. If I had seen him fly, it would have been in his last.
Oh, wow.
When he came back the second time.
Well, I'm glad you were watching.
So obviously we're going to talk about the new movie today and the old movie, but I wanted to start off with some starter questions here for you. And the first one is: Have you gotten to ride in the back seat of an F-18?
I have.
And how was it?
It was incredible. It was. I did it down in El Centro, and Matt Seaman was the pilot who flew me, who I actually got to see after a long time, a couple years ago when I went back for the 75th anniversary in Pensacola, and he was there, so it was great reconnecting with him. But no, it was life-changing. I mean, it was amazing, and a roller coaster will never be the same. And it was it was incredible. I was up for about 50 minutes or so doing everything you can imagine. And it was funny because, and this was way back when, this was around the world time, around the world speed of sound. And so I'm in the back of the jet, and Matt comes on, we're talking, he's in the front seat, I'm in the back seat. And he says, "Hey, Rob, I want this to be fun for you. We can do as much or as little as you want. I want this to be a good experience." And I was like, when am I going to get this chance? I want to do everything. Regardless of the outcome or if I take lunch or, and so we did everything you can imagine. I'm proud to say I kept my lunch. But it was. Did
you black out?
I didn't black out, but I
brown out,
grayed out. And,
okay. Yeah.
And as you well know, and they talk about this in the film, about when it grays out. So, when you hit those G forces, and as you know, the Blues don't wear G suits, and so neither do their passengers. And unlike them, I'm not in the gym every day, so it's a very, very physical flight. And so before we went up, I was briefed in the briefing room a little bit, and they give you some techniques. But it's a very physical flight. So by the end of it, we were up, about 40 minutes or 45 minutes and pulling all sorts of Gs. And then they went into what's called like a carrier braking landing, like how they land on aircraft carriers. So you're in a sustained G for about, I think it was about 7 or 8 seconds. And by that time, you're sweating and and like I said, I didn't black out, but everything just kind of went like that. And it was funny because Matt's up in the front seat, and I think he saw me, that I was starting to kind of go a little bit. And I remember distinctly, and he called back to me and said, "Hey, Rob, you good? You still with me?" And I just remember I just kind of went, "Yeah, I am."
I'm great.
And no kidding, he could have said anything to me in a negative way, like something bad was going to. And I just would have been great. Yeah. Cause you're just kind of disoriented for just about 5 or 6 seconds. But I didn't know really where I was or who I was. And then you start coming back then I was back.
Did you get a chance to get in the Super Hornet too, or was it just in the Around the World days that you got to do that?
Yeah, no, I haven't been in the Super Hornet yet, other than just up close to the cockpit. For this latest film, I was in the C-130 in Fat Albert, and sometimes when they were filming, and Jessica Young, our cinematographer, was on a harness, and we were kind of back there, and I was shooting a lot actually of the behind the scenes and things like that. So I was kind of right over her shoulder for that, which was really, really an amazing experience. But no, I haven't been in the Super Hornet yet, but I'm ready to go.
Yet. Yeah, that's the key word, yet. Awesome. So you actually started out as an actor, right? And then you transitioned into doing more behind the director work and documentary work. And I wanted to know like how you made that transition and how you got hooked up with the blues like in the first place.
So as I told you before we started, I grew up in Dallas, Texas, and I had a fascination with filmmaking and loved going to the movies and all that. So I was, and then I came out to go to college at USC out here. And I really wanted to study theater, filmmaking, and all that. And I was very fortunate. And while I was still in school, I started working and so forth. And I was on a show called Mr. Belvedere many moons ago. Your viewers will probably, this is all before their time, right? But it was a great experience. Loved the people I worked with. In fact, a bunch of the cast came to a screening of this latest film just a few days ago, and but I had always had an interest in directing as well, and so was able to start that. And whenever I wasn't doing the show on our hiatuses, I was writing and directing these short films. And long story short, one day I got a call, and it was kind of a full circle moment, because it was there's a woman named Sharon Black, and she worked at a PR firm. And they contacted me about, hey, would you like a flight with the Blue Angels? They're interested in flying you, down at El Centro. I had no idea they even did such a thing. So it took me about 2 milliseconds to say, please, can I get in my car and go down there now? And so that's how I was really introduced to the team. They had heard about some of the stuff that I had been working on, like directing and these shorts and some stuff, and then I really got to know them, and I got that incredible flight. I was very fortunate, but what really struck me as much as the flying was they let me sit in on a brief. And I went into the briefing room with them, and they didn't tell me anything about, what it would be like. And all of a sudden, and then they're talking just like you and I are talking now, just talking about different things and and doing some housekeeping and so forth. And all of a sudden, the room gets silent. It starts getting really quiet. And then nobody said anything. It's like everything just got quiet. And then the boss Wooldridge, starts going into the maneuvers, and they're at a conference table, and a couple of guys I notice are closing their eyes, and they're moving their hand like they're flying, and I was just mesmerized. I really was, and they're chair flying the show at this conference table, and went through everything. The cadence was exactly the same as it is in the air. And at that moment, that was a moment where I really said, to myself, nobody cared that I wanted to do this, but I said to myself, I've got to show the public what all goes into this. You know, it's fascinating, but also the level of excellence and commitment and level of detail that they do each and every time they fly and after they fly and the debrief and so forth. And that's really when the big light, you know, the big light bulb went off, and I was just like, I would love to show people, you know, because you go to a show and they're incredible and they look perfect, and for all people know on the ground, you know, it could be, oh, it's all done by computer, and you know, and it's not that at all, and they don't know what really goes into it, and like I said, the level of excellence and commitment, not only from the pilots, the whole team, and I was blown away. So at that point, you know, I was really interested.
So this was when you were still acting and you were brought on to do like a media flight essentially, and then you got to experience this too.
Yeah, exactly. No, I was thrilled to just get the opportunity to meet these men and women, you know, who do. I mean, I loved the Blue Angels, you know, just over the years, and I never knew I would ever be able to meet one, you know, or go down to where they do their winter training, which they do in El Centro. And that was really, you know, that was really amazing to me. So then, as it turns out, you know, we kept in touch, and, you know, I would go down to El Centro every once in a while, and as you know, the Blue Angels are a lot, you know, their foundation really is trust. And so I just kind of got to know them, and I was just fascinated with the team, and I've been fascinated with aviation and space for a long time. It wasn't too, again, I'm dating myself, but it wasn't too much earlier than that when I saw a movie called The Right Stuff. And I loved that movie, and I was just fascinated with it. You know, Chuck Yeager and test pilots and the origin of the space program, and so when I got the call to go down with the, you know, to get a flight with the Blue Angels, I was all in, and you know, I was just like a kid in a candy store. Then what happened is, soon after that, like I said, I kept in touch, kept going down. And then they let me know, hey, we just found out that we have a chance coming up to go overseas, and it'll be the first European tour in over 2 decades. And one of the places we're going is Russia, and we're going to be able to fly with the Russian Knights and do a joint air show and all this stuff. And they basically said, you know, we really want to capture this. And we're talking to a few different people. And of course, in my mind, I, you know, figure they're in the Navy, you know, they have their own folks, but would you like to put your name, you know, your hat in the ring for this and as a possibility? And I was like, absolutely, you know, I would love to, thinking there's no way, there's no way. I'm not in the Navy, never been in the military, just had a lot of respect for everybody in it, but I really thought they would probably go with somebody internal. But I wrote up a proposal and some of my ideas for it, presented that to the team. They had me down. It kind of went back and forth, you know, in terms of just, oh, can you come down again and talk to the team? And so and then they said, yeah, we like your ideas. We want to go with it.
So had you had experience with the Blue Angels before, like as a kid? Like, when was the first time you saw them? And you said you had been following them for a while, right?
Yeah, I'd been a fan of the Blue Angels. And, you know, my dad was also an aviation fan. And so growing up, you know, he would joke whenever like a jet or something would go over, and he would kind of joke about, yeah, it's almost time for me to get my pilot's license, you know. And so I definitely always just had a real fascination for the Blue Angels and aviation in general.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the new film then. We can come back to Around the World. I want to do that, but let's talk about the one that's out right now in theaters. And first things first, I guess we can let people know, in case it was not made clear, that the theatrical run is being extended a bit. Can you talk a little bit about that?
We're thrilled with the fact that the film is being extended in theaters at least another week. It'll mostly AMC theaters, but possibly others. Not sure about IMAX because they have contractual obligations with other films, but just the chance to see it on the big screen is amazing. And as I think I was telling you, I was driving to San Diego for another screening that we were doing, and the director texted me, and Paul Crowder, who's amazing, and he said, it was to me and Boss Wooldridge, and he was like, guys, my jaw is on the floor. We were in the top 10 box office. And for a documentary, that's really rare, because we were only on 250 something screens competing with some big studio films that have sometimes on 3,500 screens. And so it was pretty amazing. So then my next text was, are they going to keep us in theaters? I hope. And so it was just confirmed that, they are extending, and people can go and see it on the big screen before it goes to Amazon Prime, which it will as well.
That's incredible. I feel like people always underestimate the Blue Angels and how much of a loyal fan base they have, and we will turn out when it matters. So that's awesome to hear.
It's really true. I mean, it's amazing that it's been packed. And not only that, people are staying through the credits. In the end, it's funny. Somebody gave some stat like people's attention spans now are about 8 seconds, which is maybe 1 second less than a goldfish, right? But the fact that it just goes to show that the Blue Angels really transcend so much in terms of how they can bring people together, and people love them. And the fact that, I've been hearing people going back for repeated viewings, and this just opened on Thursday, and Friday. And so it's only been out a few days, but the fact that people are going back again and again is really just a testament to the team.
I saw a little kid, I don't know how old he was, but he had a Blue Angel outfit on. And I was like, this is like what kids do when they go to see like Marvel movies, they dress up as their favorite superhero, but it's real.
It's a dream.
In terms of like actually making the movie, obviously you directed the movie in '94. You're an executive producer on this movie. Talk a little bit about how that transition was for you. Because if people aren't aware, there is a difference in those roles, and what it was like to revisit what you had done before in this brand new context.
I mean, Around the World has been such an incredible experience and blessing, and just hearing from folks for years, and to hear you say that you watched it, multiple times, that really is super meaningful, and I've heard that from others, and which has been phenomenal. It's like the gift that keeps on giving. But at the same time, I really wanted to do a 21st century. I wanted to show the 21st century Blue Angels, and of course, technology-wise, the cameras have gotten so much better in resolution. Not to mention now they're in Super Hornets, and I really wanted. I really wanted this generation to experience, that. And so actually around the time of the 70th anniversary, back in 2016, I had talked and approached the team, and Joe Hantz was the public affairs officer. And so we started talking, and I actually started doing something even at that time. So I was all fired up, ready to go. Because of a number of different elements, that was kind of postponed, but nothing to do with the team. They were all for it, and everything was great. But as it turned out, I ended up making almost like a short film for the team about like an end of season film about the 75th, just to kind of honor them and that they were going to show at their end of season in Pensacola. And I did that. And I unfortunately couldn't be there in person, but I sent this film. Boss Wooldridge was there and he saw it. And so he called me, and we had kept in touch since around the world and maintained a friendship. And then as it happened back in 2019, we started talking about doing something for their 75th anniversary. And so I was like, boss, this is great. Wonderful. He had called me and said, we should do something. I'm like, I'm in, let's do it. And so we started again, trying to, at that point, figure out how we can do this. It was going to be for television, is how we originally envisioned it. But something to just honor the team for their 75th. We started approaching corporate sponsors and different folks. And again, a testament to the team. Everybody loved the idea. The Navy loved the idea. The people we talked to, we were trying to get financing and distribution, loved the idea. Everything was going great. And then the pandemic, right? So suddenly everybody's isolated. Nobody's going to air shows. And quite frankly, Boss and I, we were so close, and yet we weren't sure if we were dead in the water, because nobody knew. There were a lot of questions on a lot of fronts at that point and a lot of uncertainty. But as it happened, then over time, as people had heard that we were trying to make this film, other people found out about it. Kevin LaRosa, who was the aerial coordinator for Top Gun Maverick, and we ended up having a meeting with him, just a phone call, actually, not even Zoom. And he was like, and keep in mind, Top Gun Maverick hadn't come out. That was kind of put on hold because of the pandemic as well. But he said, I love the Blue Angels. If you guys ever get this off the ground, just know I'm there for you. And we were just honored and thrilled that he even wanted to be a part of it. And then also Glenn Powell, who was in Top Gun Maverick as Hangman, and he grew up with a Blue Angel poster that he had gotten signed by the pilots in his room ever since until he went off to college. And we were talking to Glenn, and originally thinking, maybe as a possible host or narrator for the film. And he was great. He just basically said, you know what? If that happens, that's fine. If I'm in it, I don't have to be in it. But if that, that happens, fine. But the main thing is I just want to see this made, because I'm a fan of the Blue Angels. And anything I can do to help you guys get this done, I'm in. And, which was incredible, and then that's when things started falling into place even more. We started having some meetings with different folks, because he had set us up with Amanda LeBeau at CAA. And so we were put in touch with people like Glenn Zipper and Sean Stewart. And these were Zoom meetings, but they were phenomenal. I mean, everyone we talked to, their eyes would light up, and they were just like kids when we were describing, kind of what we wanted to do, and of course, with everybody involved, and and so then everything kind of fell into place. Next thing you know, fast forward a little more, and Glenn Zipper talked to IMAX, and IMAX heard about it, and then it's like we have the ideal canvas for this, and we were over the moon. I mean, then suddenly it was even beyond what we had dreamed in terms of what we could try and do to really present the team in the way that they deserve.
You went from TV to IMAX. That's a pretty big jump.
No, it was incredible. John Turner is the head of documentary at IMAX, and he's been incredible. And came out to Pensacola and got an experience actually on the pier, which I can tell you about. But he's just been fantastic. Sean Stewart, who I mentioned, Paul Crowder, Mark Monroe, Hannah Minghella, Glenn Zipper. His company had a relationship with Bad Robot. So then J.J. Abrams and Hannah Minghella, who have just been supportive, every step along the way. So it's been a dream. It's been great.
Awesome. Were there any, going into this project, were there any takeaways from around the world that you wanted to, maybe pitfalls from around the world that you remembered that you wanted to avoid this time, or things that you tried to get in around the world and couldn't quite make it in, that you were adamant that I have to get this in this time?
The biggest thing for me, both in around the world and approaching this film, was it wasn't just about the flying, that we really wanted it to be the real deal, that these weren't actors and that these people are extraordinary. And not only the 6 pilots, but the 141 men and women who make up the team, and from the maintainers to the crew chiefs to the officers and so forth. And really tried our best to, we wanted to balance the humanity with the hardware, and really, that was a thing that was the most important thing for me. We didn't want to fake anything. We also knew that because of their schedule, it's not like we got it second takes. We had to kind of adjust to their schedule, and but that was a key thing for me. And going into around the world was honestly, that was the main goal. I knew that aviation fans and pilots and folks in that world would hopefully would be interested in it, and we'd have some cool flying, and again, this is before the IMAX and with the old Betacam SPs that we were using and high 8 cameras and so forth. But to me, it was more about, we wanted to connect with the people, and we wanted to have people that we wanted, folks to be able to connect and relate to these people. Because otherwise, after 10 minutes of watching really cool aerial footage, which is great, I could watch it all day, but you don't care unless you care about the people. And my goal was really just to show really who these people were, and so that it would be authentic, because they really are true life heroes. They don't look at it that way. They're very humble, but that was a thing that was super important. So when we got the opportunity to do this film, and we were having these meetings, Boss and I, before we had them, that was something we talked about. And luckily, the people that we ended up working with, they wanted exactly the same thing. Sometimes in Hollywood, you never know. Somebody's like, well, if we, we'll make up something, or let's stage this. And there was none of that. Everybody was exactly aligned and on the same page. And in a lot of ways, kind of mirrored the team in terms of wanting to just to make it as real and authentic and exciting and fun, and all those things. So it was a huge team effort. With Around the World, the big difference was we had a pretty small crew, and we by the time we got the green light to actually do it, they were going to go on this tour of 8 countries in three and a half weeks. An insane schedule. It was about 2.5 months lead time. So we didn't have time for a lot of pre-production or any of that. And luckily we were able to make it happen because we didn't want to miss history. We figured out we'd figure out the rest once we got back. True, honest to God. But so it was, it was, it was incredible what we pulled off, and I'm so proud of that film, and grateful to my fellow crew members who went on that journey with me. But then with this film, we, it was a different. It was, we're showing up and there was like 30 people in El Centro, and there's trucks with, gear coming out. And suddenly Boss and I are looking at each other going, I guess this is happening. It's good. So yeah, but really it was about the people as well, and trying to keep that balance and really show what they're all about.
Awesome. You mentioned humility, and that's something I've found with like every member of the team, including Boss Wooldridge, who we've mentioned quite extensively so far. He makes an appearance in this movie, which I interviewed him prior to seeing the movie. He never mentioned it, that he was in it. So I see the movie and I'm like, oh, there he is. This will be nice. He'll have like a little cameo, but no, he's in it like quite a bit, actually. Can you talk a little bit about the idea behind including him and sort of what purpose he serves in the movie?
Yeah, I mean, I can't say enough about Boss Wooldridge. I mean, he's just one of the best people that anyone would ever want to meet, and he's so humble, and he's a legend. I mean, he's the only 3-time leader of the team. He just makes everybody else that he's talking to feel like they're the most important person in the room. And yet he would never mention all the amazing things that he's done. And to this day, like probably 2 days ago, I will overhear him saying to people, yeah, they put way too much of me in there. They shouldn't have done that. He's incredible. He really is. And yeah, honestly, it happened naturally. It wasn't a plan for that. But as our filmmaking team, and as we were making the film, and we were there a lot with Paul and with Jessica and everybody, and Mike Fitzmaurice was another director of photography that worked with Jessica, and is Kevin LaRosa's partner, and also worked on Top Gun Maverick. But everybody got to know Boss and Wooldridge, and you can't help but be not only impressed with him, but just affected by who he is. And I kind of got a little bit about. I saw a little of that even in your interview with him. You did a great interview with him, but that's just kind of the type of person he is. And so then at a certain point in the filmmaking process, when we needed a voice beyond just the pilots that are going through it at the time, but just to kind of add that perspective, then it just came up very naturally. And we knew we wanted to also go into the history of the team, that the team started in 1946, the oldest flight demonstration squadron in existence. And not only for Boss, but also just show the legacy of the team and talk about Butch Voris, who I was lucky enough to know, and interviewed for around the world. And Butch Voris started the team back in 1946. And Boss Wooldridge was a perfect person to kind of give that perspective, and is very involved with the Blue Angels Foundation. And just, everybody knows him. And it was real important for us to try and get across in the film that, and they talk about it, they say it in the creed in the very beginning and the very end of the film: once a Blue Angel, always a Blue Angel. And, there's nobody who epitomizes a Blue Angel more than Boss Wooldridge. He's just an amazing human being.
You called him a legend. I called him a legend when I introduced him on my interview with him, and I don't think it made it into the edit, but he was like, he like shook his head when I said that.
He will always, he'll always, deflect it, and he's truly remarkable, and I've seen it. I've traveled with him many times, and even away from tarmacs, no matter who he meets, he'll show an interest or want to help anybody in any way possible. And it affected the crew. You have, like I said, all these people from Los Angeles and Hollywood and stuff, and they come in and they've worked on all these big movies and all this stuff, and yet they meet Boss, and they're just like, they're just enamored by his stories and him, and his sense of humor. He's got a great sense of humor, and then also the team. So then the team's around, saying, hi, how's everybody doing? And there's a line in the film, the suits change, but the team stays the same, and that's really true. It's that culture. And when they were around Boss Wooldridge and around the rest of the team and all the enlisted and the maintenance and everybody, and they're coming to work every day really early, by the way, when you're kind of waking up and maybe still a little grumpy or whatever. And, all of a sudden you have all these people and they're saying, hey, how you doing? Glad to be here. And, and they remember your names, and you're like, where am I? And I had experienced that before, but a lot of these other folks hadn't. And it was really wonderful to see, probably by the second or third day, they were a little bit, they're kind of like, oh, okay, well, you know what? We need to step up our game too. And they wanted to be better the next day than the day before, and as a filmmaking team. And that was true all the way down. So it was really interesting to see how the team really affected the filmmaking team, where hopefully at a certain point, everybody, just got really aligned, and everybody was just whatever it takes. It wasn't about what's your title or what's your position or whatever. It's more about, how can I help make the film better, and then, and just witnessing the Blue Angels, it's infectious. You just can't help but be inspired by being around them.
Yeah, that's always been the secret sauce of the team to me, of what they can inspire that in other people, even, not people who are aviators, but just in their everyday lives, it just inspires everybody to be better, which is so cool.
Both in this film and in Around the World, the Speed of Sound, some of my favorite comments would come from people that were like, hey, I watched Around the World, the Speed of Sound because my husband wanted to watch it. I had no interest or knowledge about aviation, and I wasn't really, I don't know anything about it. And yet they were like, they got caught up in it. Again, back to the people and the stories and what they do and their commitment. And they, and they said they loved it, and they loved, the team, and they could relate a lot to it. Those were some of my favorite comments from people that just you don't know until you see it or experience it. And that's what we're starting to see with this new film, with this IMAX film. Same thing, people are going again and again because they just are inspired by it. And I think it's not only about aviation and although that's great, and also saluting the men and women that do what they do, and they do it and on the Blue Angels, and then they're back, to the fleet and defending our country and everything else. But anyone, and the Blue Angels will go to what they call commits. Every location that they go to do an air show, they'll do commits, and they'll go to a high school or they'll go to a hospital, and they talk to the kids. And Boss Kesselring, what he said was, we go and we do this, and we talk to these young people, and it's really just if it helps inspire them to go after their own dreams, whatever that is, and get across, that whatever it is that you want to do, just go after it and work hard and be humble, but work hard and go after your dreams. And as he puts it, have relentless optimism, but always go forward, and go after whatever it is that, you can accomplish some pretty extraordinary things. And as he said, that's a really cool thing to be a part of.
Now, I'm definitely a huge fan of the solos, and I feel like this movie focuses much more on the diamond than on the solos, which is fine. There's obviously the friendly rivalry that happens between the solos and the diamond, and that's featured in the film. But I wanted to know if there were any moments that maybe got cut out, or things from the solos that fans might like to hear about.
Yeah, I mean, I love the solo. First of all, Whiskers and Chewie are just not only amazing pilots, but just amazing people. And I met Whiskers when he was the narrator, and this was before we knew we were going to be making the film necessarily. We didn't have anything in place. Couldn't be nicer or more helpful in every way, and just the greatest guy. And Chewie, is the same way. And it's interesting in the film, Chewie, and partially in real life, but Chewie doesn't always say a lot, but when he speaks, and if you watch the film, the things he says are really, really pretty amazing, pretty philosophical and kind of poetic even. He's the one who says, you got to push the I believe button, and that we're all cut from the same cloth. And then later in the film, when he talks about, you don't really remember specific weekends or air shows, it's moments. And then when we're really in sync and flying as one, and the world kind of stops and stops spinning, and it's just kind of, those are the moments that he remembers, So I really wish we could, our original cut of this film was a lot longer. And really, let's hope for a director's special edition cut. That would be great. But they were both really, really just fantastic, and just incredible. The only other solo story I can tell you is I mentioned John Turner, who's the head of IMAX. I don't know if Boss Wooldridge told this story or not, but he came out to Pensacola. We were about midway through shooting, and he came to Pensacola, and we took him out on the pier. Well, if you've seen the trailer or you've seen the film, and when the sneak pass comes, that's right over the pier. And so we took John Turner out to the pier. This is the head of IMAX, right? IMAX documentary. And he loved the Blue Angels. He had seen them on TV and so forth. He had never seen them live. So his very first experience, we're taking him out on the pier, and everything's going, and he's loving it. And first of all, they never allow people out on the pier other than if you're on the team. And we were filming, obviously. And so we were with someone from the Blue Angels who was, guiding us and so forth. And all of a sudden, we know the sneak pass is coming up. So we're getting our cameras ready. John Turner is there. And the Blue Angel who was with us from Public Affairs said, "Hey, guys, you might want to hang on to the pier." And, and John Turner, he has no idea what's coming. And I'm telling you, Chewie comes in, and later I asked him, he's about 50 feet, okay? And he comes in just under the speed of sound. And I've been at a lot of air shows and in some pretty unique positions. Never experienced anything like that. And he comes hauling the mail, comes over the pier, and it was like a rocket, and it literally like knocked us back. And John Turner, I'm a little worried, like, how's he going to react too? And he goes by, and John Turner is just thrilled. He's like a kid. He just couldn't be happier with that whole experience. He loved it, and it was amazing. So later, we're up in the ready room, and I see Chewie. First time I've seen him since that sneak, and I'm like, Chewie, that was amazing. And he's, again, they're so humble. They're like, oh yeah, oh good. I'm glad you enjoyed it. And I'm like, so how low were you? And he's like, probably about 50 feet. And then I'm thinking, now is that 50 feet from the pier or the water? And he's like, no, probably 50 feet from the water. And so I'm like, okay, well, so he was literally about 25 feet above our heads when he came over. And I think it's something that none of us will forget. But no, the solos they're just awesome.
As someone you weren't on the team, you're an outsider to the team, but you are very closely, ingrained with the team. You know them very well, and you know how they operate, and you've now seen them operate for 30 years now. What do you think is like the key thing that maintains that culture over that long of a time? I mean, that's just 30 years. The Blues have been around for 75, and that culture has maintained the entire way through. What do you think is like the primary thing that brings that forward?
It's that idea of glad to be here. It's like they really take that to heart, and it's not something that was ever talked about when I first met the team. I just heard them say that all the time, and I didn't really know exactly what it meant. And it means different things to different people, but they're so grateful to be able to be with the people that they're with, and to have the opportunity to represent, the Navy and Marine Corps and the folks out, on the ship, on an aircraft carrier, and to inspire people and to be able to have that impact on kids and adults. And as you know, their demographic runs the gamut. Little kids love them, and you have, people in their 90s or hundreds that go and that's kind of the common denominator. There's like a love of aviation, but also what they represent. And I think why, again, I'll go back to Butch Voris. When I was lucky enough to get to know him very well, and an amazing individual, and a great guy. And he said, when he started the team, they thought that this would maybe last a couple years. It was right after World War II, and he said, maybe 2 or 3 years, and then that would be it. And to see them at that time, that was back in the 90s, and to see them thrive today. And he was saying that, every team wants the next team to be better. And that's true. You talk to the current team. I was just with them in Pensacola, and at the end of the season, they're going to want the next team to be even better. And they're always just it's a that drive perfection that they know they'll never reach, but along the way, as Boss Wooldridge said, you can catch excellence, and it's really about the people. It's not about them as individuals. And when they take off that blue suit, they just they want the next team to be even better, which is pretty remarkable.
Purpose greater than self, right? Absolutely. Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about around the world.
Yeah.
How did I know you mentioned that you were a huge fan of The Right Stuff, which has Dennis Quaid. Was that how Dennis Quaid got involved in that project? Because I know that the movie was not made for a lot of money, but Dennis Quaid was a big star at that time. So how did you get him on board?
He was on the top of my wish list. I'm big on wish lists and stuff, and because you never know, and yeah, I mean, he was at the top of the list. And again, just like when I put my hat in the ring to capture their trip to Europe, I thought there's no way they're going to pick me. Same thing. He was at the top of my list. I never thought we would get him, but and what happened, I did know that he was a pilot, and what happened is I wrote a letter to him because we certainly couldn't afford him. And shout out to Robert Peters, a buddy of mine who is an actor and also involved in a lot of things. Great guy. And as it happens, he got it to Dennis's assistant. And by the way, I think this was when we were in Europe. We were kind of trying to figure out how are we going to try and find him. And, if he says no, he says no, but, it's worth a shot. Worst they can do is say no. So basically we got that to his assistant, Bo, who's also a great guy. And Bo got it to Dennis. And he was like, I love the Blue Angels. This is fantastic. I'm in. I was, and then we told him we didn't have much of a budget, but we would love him to have a flight with the Blue Angels. And at that point, he's like, I'll fly down. I'll take, and he did. He flew his own plane. We didn't even have to fly him. He did. He flew his own plane to El Centro. This was, of course, after we were back from the trip. And we took a Steadicam down, and we had the crew. And he flew in, was as nice, and he was, again, in awe of the team. And they, of course, were happy to meet him. And I even put a little nod to The Right Stuff in the movie in Around the World at the beginning. And he was game. When I showed him kind of that intro, he was very self-deprecating and he just wanted to be around the team. And they gave him a flight in formation, and that's in the movie. That's in Around the World. And so he's been great. Yeah, I can't thank him enough. And similarly, music I thought was really important.
I was going to ask you about this anyway, so this is perfect. Great. Go.
You can ask. Go ahead.
I was going to ask about the importance of music, and clearly it's matters very much to you. The Queen song was like just incredible. Like made that movie just work. My dad played that at my wedding, at the rehearsal dinner of my wedding. He took out a little Bluetooth speaker. He gave it like a speech, and he played that song in reference to your movie. So that's how, deep it's ingrained.
That's very cool. Well, so the quick story to that was when we went over to Europe, we couldn't fly commercial because we couldn't keep up with their schedule. Again, 8 countries, 3.5 weeks, right? So we had to get permission from the Pentagon for our little crew to go on the C-130. And for that trip, they brought 2. So they had Fat Albert, and then they brought another C-130 specifically for that trip. And so Fat Albert, they affectionately call Bert, and the other
Ernie, right? Ernie.
Yeah, Ernie.
Yeah.
We had Bert and Ernie as a C-130. So our crew either was on Bert or Ernie, going over there. So on one of the first flights when we were overseas, and I'm on, I think Fat Albert, and just like in the IMAX movie when they're talking about, you see how it's rack seating and you're shoulder to shoulder with somebody else, and there's like a generator, in front of you because they keep all their equipment, and it's on your knees, And I remember being on one of the first flights in, forget where we were going, I think Romania. And I just, I always thought the music would be key. Again, I just wanted that relatability and I'm a drummer. I'm a big music fan anyway. So is Paul Crowder, by the way, which we bonded over. He's an incredible drummer. But so I'm in the C-130, and I was trying to think about how I wanted to open the film on Around the World. And I was listening to different tracks and, just trying to get some inspiration for different things, and really wanted to keep the energy going. And I heard that I'm a big Queen fan anyway, and I heard A Kind of Magic. And it just something, I literally saw that whole sequence cut in my head, even though we hadn't shot much. And it was just really clear. And I was just like, God, this would be great, a great way to kind of open it up. And again, my my eyes were, my eyes were bigger than my appetite or whatever. But again, thinking there's no way we're going to get this right, because Queen was huge, at the time, still is. But that was kind of the goal. But I was kind of using that. And what happened is, again, that was kind of the wish list. And much later in the process, I wrote a letter to Jim Beach, who's Queen's manager, I think still to this day. And I just said, hey, this is what we're doing. It's a goodwill tour. We're going to Russia for the first time and all these different countries and stuff. And again, I'm going to date myself, faxed it to him, right? Right? And he was in England. And again, thinking there's no way. And then like 2 days later, a fax comes over, and it's by Jim Beach saying, hey, I presented this to the band. They think it's a great idea. It's really cool what you're doing to try and build, international relations and everything. And we're good with it. You can use it. And that's how it ended up in the film.
I feel like the Blue Angels do that. They just it's a kind of magic, and it just makes stuff happen.
There's something special about the Blue Angels, and people just, they want to be a part of it, which has been, amazing.
You mentioned with Around the World that you kind of had an attitude of we just need to get to Russia, right? And then we'll just figure it all out later. That probably was not a good thing for your editor to hear on that project. Can you talk a little bit about how the editing came together for Around the World?
Yeah, absolutely. No, you're absolutely right. And it was funny, when I was looking for an editor, I went around and met with some different people. And I was actually at a post-production house, and I was meeting with a potential composer at this post-production house. And it was funny. Then all these people, right after I met this person, they came over and they said, have you met Chris, who's down the hall? And I thought they were talking about another composer. So they're like, yo, you have to meet Chris, when they heard that I was working with the Blue Angels. I go down, I meet Chris, and I walk in his office, and there's a picture, I swear, behind he's at the editing console, and there's a big picture of the double Farvel in his office of the Blue Angels. And I'm like, this is strange. And then they introduce me to him, and they say, hey, Rob's working on this project called the Blue Angels. And literally this guy spins around in his chair and says, you mean you've been working with Gucci and Irish and Dino? And I'm like, so you know the team? How long have you known the team? He's like, I don't know the team. I've just read about them in my aviation magazines and all this stuff. And, I couldn't believe it, so I told him about the project. Anyway, he ends up coming aboard as the editor and was really instrumental in Around the World, the Speed of Sound. His call sign, by the way, is Aviation Boy. So that tells you something right there. Um, and we had a great time putting it together.
Was there anything, and you can plead the fifth on this one, but was there anything from the Russia trip that you were not allowed to include in the movie that you captured? Whether it was the US or the Russians or whoever it was.
Gosh, I have so many stories I could tell you about it. So I don't want to take up all your time, but um, well, a couple things. To your question, there was nothing that we couldn't show. And again, back to the trust thing, because they trusted me as a filmmaker. They never restricted my camera anywhere. I think we were the first ones to actually go into a full debrief. Usually that's only people who have skin in the game, as they call it. And so we were allowed in with that everywhere. And that, again, that was because of that trust that was built up, not only in me, but my crew. But they also knew we wouldn't include, anything that would be, not that there was, but when they met with the Russian team, they went and they flew. I can get into that if you want, about swapping jets, which was incredible. But then later that day, as a celebration, they took them to a dinner, and they all had dinner together. Again, they didn't speak the same language, but by that time they had flown together, and it was incredible because you would never know they weren't speaking the same language, and they loved it. But the Russians are known for their vodka, and they're very good at it, so there was some of that, but again, there was no restriction on anything. But if you want me to go into,
please tell me the stories. I want to hear the stories.
All right. So one, as I told you, my crew was on one of two C-130s going from place to place. Originally, I think we were going from Finland. Originally, we were going to go to Russia on Fat Albert. And Fat Albert was going to land first before the jets arrived. Okay. And so we were like, great, because we need to be there. We need to be prepared because this is history. When they fly in to Russia, we've got to be ready and capture that moment. And then what happened is there was some mechanical thing where they had to work on Fat Albert a little longer, and they needed to get the people over there that needed to be over there, and we were the film crew, right? So we were told, hey, sorry, Rob, but you guys are going to go on Ernie on the second C-130, so you're going to have to come after the team lands and everything, like 4 hours later. I mean, we would have missed everything. And I just remember, going into panic mode, like we can't miss history. And so I didn't know what to do. I'm talking to my crew. We're trying to figure things out. So finally I just said, okay, get your bags, get packed. We're going to the airport. And they're like, going to the airport. And this is like a 5-man crew, right? And myself. And I don't know. We'll figure it out. So we just jammed to the airport. We get to the airport and have no idea what's going to happen. But I'm like pleading with them, saying, are there any commercial flights to Russia, to Moscow? And I explained the whole situation. And again, broken English, right? I don't know. They kind of understand English, but and thank goodness I'm talking to them. They get their, the manager and then the supervisor, and it's we were one of the corporate sponsors was Continental Airlines. They have a sister airlines called SAS Airlines. So we were dealing with the SAS folks. I'm forever indebted to SAS. Well, I'm there at the counter, right at the ticket counter, pleading my case. My crew and I, we have to get over there. Whatever it takes. And finally, they bring out the head supervisor, and he comes out and he kind of looks a little serious. So I'm thinking, okay, this is not going to go well. And all of a sudden, I'm telling him the story, and he's looking at my shirt, and then he's like, "Is that a Blue Angel pen?" And I was like, "Yes, it is." And he said, "Do you have any more of that, of those? Because we love to, give them to our crew." And so right away, I'm signaling to my crew, "Get the bag of pens," and they go for it. And then next thing we know, they're like, "You know what? We have a flight. We can get you on board, you and your flight." I mean, they didn't charge us. It was unbelievable. And,
oh my God.
And they just said, we want to help you get there. And we gave them as many pens as they wanted, obviously, and a big thank you. And that's how we got there. Otherwise, we would have missed the whole thing. And what happened is then once if you recall from the film, they're joined by Russian aircraft. And they're brought in with Sequoias and MiGs on their wing, and we would have missed all of that. And we, luckily, that saved us. We were on the ground. They come in, and then the second part of that is they land, and it was as if the Beatles arrived. I mean, it was. I've never seen anything like it. In America, they get out of their jets. They have a whole walk down and routine they do. They were swarmed with thousands of kids and people, swarmed the jets, ran out to the jets. And, before they even got the cockpit up, they were swarmed by people. And they get out, and it was, I can only describe it as it was just like Beatlemania, but for the Blue Angels. And they were just so, thrilled to have them there and excited. And, the wall had just come down a few years, before that. And it was incredible. And then at that point, I'm telling all my crew, grab a camera, you go this way, you go this way. And we're just trying to cover it. And I grabbed a camera, and they were all over, and we just tried to capture it as best we could. Then as far as originally, they were going to do an exchange flight, and one Blue Angel, was going to fly in a Russian jet, and one Russian pilot was going to fly in one Blue Angel jet. That's what was on paper. That all went out the window. They were both the Russians and our guys, were so excited, and they were just like kids in a candy store, and they started giving each other flights. And in the MiGs and in the F-18s, and luckily we were there to capture it. And if you've seen the film, you can just kind of see it in the excitement of the faces. And it was really a beautiful thing to see, just in terms of the time that we were with them. And even though that's the other thing, when they got these flights, they didn't speak English and we didn't speak Russian. And the only thing that they knew was,
you pilot, I pilot.
You pilot, I pilot. That was it. And when they said you pilot, then they'd take the stick and vice versa. And it worked out great. And they did that. And then by the time we went to the dinner, they were all united. And there wasn't any worry about the barrier of language or politics or any of that stuff. It was just people that had a common love of aviation and mutual respect for each other. And growing up in the world back then, prior to that wall coming down, that would have been unheard of, because so to see everybody coming together like that was unbelievable. One of the most amazing things that I've ever seen.
I feel like we could use some of that these days, huh?
Absolutely. I mean, that's my hope. Having been in Russia with the team and experiencing that, I sure hope and believe that, we'll get there, because when it's person to person, and that's what it was. It was person to person, and you meet the people, and we met the kids, and we met, the teachers that brought the kids down and so forth, and all the people. They were fantastic, and they were so welcoming, and they were giving us, their hats and their covers, and we were giving them things and exchanging things at the end. And so it's definitely, we need to get back to that.
Now, to bring us to the close of this around the world stuff here, I've heard that a lot of the current members on the team had a similar experience to me, right? If you do the math, right? Like the average Blue Angel wingman is about 30 something years old, right? Mid 30s. So they were kids when your movie came out, right? And they were, some of them, inspired
Evan,
by the movie.
You keep bringing that up. You're just trying to make me feel.
I'm just trying to make you feel old. Yeah, that's really
I was 12 when I directed Around the World.
Yeah, it was an incredible effort for a 12-year-old, really. The current team members, the current crop of pilots, obviously was inspired by the work that you did. How does that make you feel to have had an impact, in an organization that you respect so much, clearly? How does it make you feel to know that, like, you had a part in that?
I could just, it's amazing. And it's truly been the honor of a lifetime. It really has, to try and help tell the story of the Blue Angels and get that to folks. Really has been the honor of a lifetime. I mean, I'm thrilled. I love hearing when people said that they've seen Around the World. I'm thrilled when people have said that they've seen this IMAX movie that we're all very, very proud of. And it's just been an honor, and it's also surreal. Because these guys are the heroes, and so just to ever hear that anyone, much less, a Blue Angel or other pilots, or, that when they said that they've enjoyed the stories that we're trying to get out there to tell their story, honestly, that's the best review we can get, is just knowing that. And that comes from the people, from the families, from the pilots. And it's truly been an honor. So I just feel very, very grateful, very fortunate, and very glad to be here.
I was going to say, yeah, of course. Extrapolating this out, we can make me feel old for a sec. In 30 years, 2054, when there are pilots on the team who have maybe seen this movie that's out right now, is there anything that you would say to that kid who's watching now that might become that pilot later on?
I would just say, whatever it is, whatever dream that they have, whatever they want to do, to just go after it, and try, take that inspiration that they get from the Blue Angels and the men and women that are part of the organization, and whatever it is, if it's to be a pilot or to be a Blue Angel or to be a doctor or to be, whatever it is that they want to do. I think the Blue Angels really exemplify what human beings are capable of, and that you shouldn't limit yourself. And particularly in these times, the world can be pretty tough, and everybody has setbacks, including the You hear it in the IMAX movie, the pilot. She's applied 3 times, but he was persistent about it, and he kept working and he kept working. And so, especially in these times, to have the example of this team that is so diversified, and you have people from all different walks of life coming from all over the world, all for a common goal, and to work hard and try and accomplish a common goal, it's pretty hard not to be inspired by that. But I would just say to that little boy or that little girl, don't put limits on yourself. Don't give in to cynicism, and work hard, and some pretty amazing things can come true.
Wise words. All right. Well, we can wrap this up here. The movie comes out on May 23rd on Amazon Prime. So if you haven't seen it, you should go see it in theaters. That's the overriding thing. Go see it in IMAX if you can before it leaves IMAX. But it sounds like it's also getting extended into other theaters as well. So that's excellent. So find it in your local theater, go see it, and then go home and watch it on Amazon Prime.
Definitely. And I just wanted a quick shout out to Amazon as well, because they've been great partners to work with, and they really wanted to make this an event and to bring people out to the theaters, and then obviously, to be able to watch it. So we've been very fortunate with everybody on the film, and we just hope people will go out, grab their friends, and see it and enjoy it.
Like I said, I watched it on a VHS tape. I watched your film on a VHS tape. So no matter the screen, it is still inspiring, but the bigger the screen, the more inspiring, I guess. I don't know. Go see it, and then go see it at home. Just go see it. So thank you, Rob, so much for taking the time.
Thank you, Evan. Really appreciate it. Thanks so much.